Hey, welcome guys. In this video I'm going to be doing a review of the Vizio M Series displays sold throughout 2017 and into the beginning of 2018. Now the reason I said displays is because they do not have a TV tuner built into them, so Vizio does not call them TVs, they are technically displays. Now they do all have 4K capability, they are powered with LED, and they do have HDR support. The particular model I have is the M50E1 version. Now in terms of processing power, Vizio lists on their website that the internal specs of this device has an 8-core processor built into it, which sounds great, right? Well, that's not exactly the case. You see, the performance is just kind of mediocre. Having an 8-core processor doesn't really mean anything, it's just a big number. But what you guys are seeing right now is the only apps built into the TV. See the button at the bottom right says access more apps? It doesn't actually do anything, it actually just tells you to use your Chromecast support on your smartphone, which I'll get into just a little bit. So the apps you see right here are currently what's available. It's not much because it's designed more for Chromecast streaming. But what I'm trying to demonstrate for you guys is now how quickly it opens a Pluto app, which is not the fastest I've seen in a smart TV, but it's not exactly the slowest. But having an 8-core processor doesn't really mean much. Where the TV really shines is using Chromecast mirroring. So if you have a strong home Wi-Fi network and you have a lot of great streaming apps built into your smartphone, that's where this TV really shines in terms of smart app usage. What's pretty neat though is if you have Google Assistant on your smartphone or a Google Home product, for example, as long as it has Google Assistant built into it, you can command it to play something on the TV. Here's an example. Play Jessica Jones on the living room display. And there you have it, it starts projecting Jessica Jones on Netflix. One of the great things about getting a new TV is just how that excitement feels when you're about to set it up and get it running for the first time, but this wasn't exactly a great example. What happened is that during the TV setup, it's going to look for a software update automatically, but it detected it over my Wi-Fi network and said it's going to install Don't Turn Off the TV, and it just froze for about an hour. Reluctantly, I yanked the power cord, started out the process all over again, and this time it worked, even though there's a concern because it specifically said don't turn off the TV. I finally got the first update running, and on the second update, it crashed yet again. I did the same process, and after the second update was completed, the TV finally worked stable, and it's been working pretty stable ever since then. But do keep in mind that if you do buy this out of the box, if it freezes, don't be shocked because Vizio just didn't really do the initial setup process that well. Switching over to the hardware, on the back left of the TV, what you guys see is the USB port, component cable input, and of course an HDMI input. However, switching over to the back of the TV, you have an Ethernet port for wired Ethernet connection. Of course, there's built-in Wi-Fi as well, 2 audio jack ports, optical audio output port, and 3 HDMI ports, which one of them does support ARC for better control of your various devices. Switching over to the bottom left of the TV, you have your power, volume control, and input controls. It does allow for 4K content to be played back at 60 frames per second. There's also a Wi-Fi adapter built in which supports up to 802.11ac and Bluetooth 4.1. So as I mentioned earlier, there is a USB port on this TV, which you would think is great, but unfortunately it's not. See, it can play 1080p videos if they're encoded in H.264 or H.265, and if the file type is MP4 or MKV, it'll work just fine. But if you guys try to play a 4K video, it will not work. So right now I'm going to demonstrate a 1080p video for you guys. But if you try to play a 4K video, if it was encoded in H.264 or H.265 and the file type is MP4 or MKV, it won't work. Basically, to make this very simple, if you have 4K videos recorded from your cell phone, you transfer it to a USB stick and try to play on this TV, most likely it's not going to work. I find it very ironic it doesn't play 4K video files. As you can see at the top, it says video format not supported. The only workaround to this is if, of course, you use it through the Chromecast feature. What's worse is that you can't play files over your home network. So the only way to do that is if you load Plex on a computer, for example, and then use the Chromecast feature on your cell phone to cast that Plex video. What I find really annoying here is that 6 years ago when I paid for a 1080p TV, back 6 years ago on the same price point and almost the same TV size, it wasn't a smart TV, but it could play almost any 1080p video at the time, which was the standard. And it could also play videos over my network. And I find this really disappointing in 2017, it can't do that. Now I do apologize if I keep saying TV just as a habit, but remember, this is a display. The best workaround for your home media network playback is to connect an external media player like I did. I have the NVIDIA Shield connected, I'm happy with it. When it comes to 4K content and quality, it looks fantastic, especially if you have 4K HDR content, say from Amazon or Netflix, it'll look great. Certain HD content, say from watching Vice in 720p or certain TV shows in 1080p, I noticed that this TV tries to upscale it because sometimes the content is just like, man, that's way better than 1080p TV, but of course that varies with the upscaling. One thing to keep in mind is that this is advertised as having 120Hz refresh rate. There is an ability to increase the refresh rate, but it darkens the screen quite a bit. I really recommend just sticking with the regular refresh rate of 60Hz, but that's kind of what you expect for such a cheap display. And some of that great quality is also in thanks to all different display sizes having 32 local dimming zones. One thing to keep in mind is that out of the box, the TV will be very saturated. The colors are just too amplified. You'll have to play around with them and make them adjustable to what you think is perfect. Now, the display does come with two 10-watt speakers, which I find to be pretty adequate. It's not bad. But on a lot of forum posts, people complain that the volume's too low, but I have to highly disagree. I noticed the same thing, but that depends on the content being played. Because I've played the same content on this TV and on my other 1080p TV, the volume was low on that same source. But when I switched to TV show, on both TVs, it was fine. So it comes down to which source is playing. But if you notice the volume bar at the bottom, 24, it's really high up. It's covering a lot of the screen at the bottom, which is really annoying, and it stays there for about 5 seconds. So if you're watching content that has subtitles, expect it to kind of cut off the bottom of the TV as I'm demonstrating again. Kind of a bizarre thing for Vizio to do. So I'm reviewing the 50-inch version, but all the specs and picture quality carries over identically to the other size versions of this display. When it comes to power consumption, I found something very interesting in my research on the Vizio website. It is not energy efficient compliant. So the version I have is 50-inch and it consumes a whopping 124 watts of power. Whereas the same size LED TV from Samsung or LG tend to consume about 50 to 60 watts of power, so almost half the electricity. But when the TV is off, or rather the display, it only consumes less than 0.5 watts of power. My 50-inch version weighs about 29.76 pounds, but all versions tend to measure about 8.7 inches deep. Even though this is considered a budget TV with a great 4K display, it's nice to know that Vizio puts some effort into their clean, minimalistic design, as you can see in the legs. Unfortunately, due to that leg design, it also means you can't swivel or rotate. But that simple, clean design is also exemplified in the narrow edges that you can find on the sides, which gives it a nice, clean look, especially if you have narrow space on where to put your TV. So the remote that comes out of the box is a pretty nice fit. It's not too large, and I find that it's somewhat comfortable, but it does feel kind of cheap at the same time. But moving past that, the buttons for the main controls are designed to be within easy reach, which is nice to have, although I do find it kind of odd that there's no fast forward or rewind button. But if using the remote that comes out of the box isn't really your thing, well, you're in luck. If you're on Android or iOS, for example, you can download the Vizio Remote app, and it has almost the exact same controls and more built into this app. Now, it does have some pretty unique stuff included, but as I mentioned, it does have the basic controls of the app. Now, the unique things here is if you want to say go to TV shows or movies, you can pop it up and see some recommended content. Clicking on that content will then take you, say, to the Google Play page where you can buy the movie or rent it if you want and start casting it straight to the TV. So the big question is, should you get one of these TVs out of this Vizio series? Sorry, it's a display, not a TV, bad habit. Now, the answer to that, it doesn't matter which size you get. My opinion, yes. For that price, you're getting a pretty good deal. You're getting 4K HDR, which looks fantastic if the source is 4K HDR. And of course, 1080p content, I've seen some of it kind of scale up just a little bit. Usually upscaling is pretty bad, but in this case, it's not bad. It does a pretty decent job. The big drawbacks here, as I mentioned earlier, is you should be able to get in 2017 a display or TV with decent USB playback and local area playback of content from your home server. Of course, there are free workarounds with that, like Plex server, but it's just sad that it's not built into it. So if you guys found this video useful, be sure to check out my social links in the video description. Hit that like button, it does help, subscribe, and thanks for watching.